The river was colder than the grave and twice as greedy. Jedediah Boone plunged in without thinking. Just boots, breath, and a hollow sort of courage. The sky blazed orange behind him, setting fire to the edges of the world. It was the end of another blistered day in the Arizona territory. But here in the water, time turned slow as molasses. He saw her dress first, silver cloth fluttering beneath the current, fringe dancing like underwater grass. A single feather floated beside her, spiraling like a dying bird. Her arms hung loose, drifting apart from her body, as if she'd already given herself to the river. Jed's heart kicked up into his throat. He reached her, pulled her free, and kicked toward the shallows. Her body was limp but warm. Thank God, still warm. The river fought to reclaim her, pulling at her ankles like jealous hands. Jed dragged her through it, stumbling, gasping, swearing through his teeth. His vest clung heavy with water, shirt half torn from the strain. Blood trickled from his arm where a rock had opened him. He didn't feel it, didn't care. Kneeling in the shallows, he gathered her close and stared at the stillness of her face. She looked carved from riverstone, cheekbones high and proud, lips tinged blue, dark lashes unmoving. There was no name for her yet, no story, just a woman not breathing, and a man on the edge of something nameless. Her chest heaved once, then again. A cough sputtered from her lips, and water spilled out like a secret. Her fingers twitched. Jed exhaled shakily, forehead dropping to hers. "You're all right," he whispered. "You're all right now." But she didn't answer. Her eyes never opened. By the time Jed reached the Apache camp with her slung in his arms, the sun had died behind the red rock bluffs. Shadows moved like spirits between the lodge poles. The wind carried no voices, only drums, low distant, like hearts remembering. They saw him, of course. Warriors with spears and hard eyes. Women with sharpened stares. He expected arrows. Got silence instead. The medicine woman took the girl from his arms without a word. Her hands were practiced, firm, reverent. Jed stood there dripping, half-drowned, blood mixing with water at his boots. No one touched him. No one spoke. And then a man stepped forward, older, broad-shouldered. His eyes carried storms. Chief Taza. He looked Jed over like a man deciding whether to get a deer or let it run. His gaze paused on the scratch bleeding down Jed's arm, then rose to his eyes. "You bring her back," he said in English, salted with gravel. Jed gave a slow nod. "Found her in the river. Thought she was, but she breathed." The chief's eyes narrowed. "And now?" Jed looked toward the tent where the woman had been taken. "Now I stay. Until she wakes." A long silence passed between them, and Jed braced for rejection. It came not through words, but in the way Chief Taza turned his back and walked away. Jed made camp by his horse, far from the fire circles. He wasn't invited in, but he wasn't driven out either. That, he figured, was all the permission he'd get. He unrolled a blanket under the stars and listened to the night breathe. The drums stopped after midnight. Coyotes took their place. In the morning, she didn't come out. In the evening, neither did she. By the third day, Jed rode back toward Cinder Valley. Town hadn't changed. The faces still stared too long, or not at all. At the general store, old Miss Whitley muttered behind her scarf. At the saloon, Sheriff Danner gave him a wary look and asked nothing. At the livery, someone had carved red lover into the post near his stall. Jed said nothing. That was his way. He took the weight and let it settle into his spine. His ranch sat quiet, half-mended, paint flaking off the porch rail like old skin. The wind spoke louder out here. He fixed a saddle, repaired a gate. All the while, her face drifted into his thoughts like wood smoke, half-formed, ever lingering. He didn't know her name, but he remembered the silver dress, the feather, the coldness in her hands that had slowly turned to warmth. They'd called him reckless before, called him worse. But that day, in that river, he hadn't felt reckless. He'd felt seen, like something had called out, and he'd answered without thinking, as if some part of him had been drowning too. The dream started after that. Her face, still and glowing beneath the surface. her lips moving without sound, his hands reaching always too slow. He didn't return to the Apache camp for 5 days. Didn't saddle up with purpose. Just found himself on the canyon trail before he realized his hands were steering him there. He saw her standing by the river, ankle deep, looking into the current like it might still hold something of hers. She turned slowly, and their eyes met. Jed stopped a few feet back, tipped his hat. She didn't return the gesture, but she didn't look away either. No one else was there. Just the water, just the quiet, just them. She stepped out of the river and approached. Her movements were light, soundless, like deer stepping through sagebrush. She reached into a satchel and pulled something small, a leather pouch, hand-stitched, colored with tiny blue beads. She placed it in his palm. Her fingers brushed his. They were warm now. Jed looked down at it. Blue corn. Sacred. A gift not given lightly. He looked up, searching her eyes for meaning. But she was already walking away, dress swaying, fringe catching the wind like wings reborn. He stood alone on the bank, thumb running across the beadwork. The river whispered again, same as before, but this time it felt like a promise instead of a warning. And for the first time in years, Jed Boone didn't feel so lost. The night they came for him, the wind had changed. Jedediah Boone had always trusted wind. It carried scent before it carried sound, stirred horses before footsteps could. But that night, the air was too still, too quiet. The cottonwoods didn't rustle, and even the coyotes held their breath. He sat outside his half-built home, lantern flickering on the porch rail, the blue corn pouch resting beside him. The land gifted by Chief Taza stretched wide behind him, high on the ridgeline like a place the stars could reach. No fences yet, no walls, just space to breathe and a silence he'd earned. The fire they'd built earlier, him and the woman, still smoldered in the pit, orange coals buried under ash. Then came the hoofbeats. 6, maybe 7 horses, ridden hard and mean. Dust rose like a storm cloud, and Jed stood before the first shout reached him. You made your choice, Boone. The men rode in like a wave of fever. One held a rope, another a torch. Their faces, half hidden under hats, burned with something colder than hate, fear polished by ignorance, sharpened by drink. Jed didn't reach for his gun. He stepped off the porch slow, hands low, voice calm. This ain't your land. One man spat. Ain't yours neither. You sold your blood for a patch of cursed ground and an Indian's pity. The rope flew fast. Jed didn't move in time. It caught him by the neck, yanked him forward, knees scraping dirt. He hit the ground hard, vision flashing with dust and blood and shame. The rope burned into his throat, and the jeers circled him like wolves. But then, hooves again. A different rhythm, lighter, swift. She rode in from the east, silhouetted against the moon. Her silver dress caught the lantern light, shimmering like something pulled from dream or fire. She didn't yell, didn't raise her voice. She just rode straight into the chaos, a bow slung across her back and a single arrow nocked, not drawn, not needed. The men stilled. They didn't fear her weapon. They feared the stillness in her eyes. She dismounted without hurry, stepped between Jed and the circle of men. You shame yourselves, she said, her voice like distant thunder, quiet but endless. You shame the land. One man laughed, nervous. You don't belong here. Her gaze didn't waver. And you do. The wind returned just then, as if summoned by her breath. It moved through the grass, stirred the horses, carried the scent of cedar and smoke. The rope slackened around Jed's neck. He coughed once, tasting copper, and crawled to his knees. The man with the torch dropped it. Flames licked the dry grass, then fizzled. One by one, the riders turned their horses and disappeared into the dark, taking their hate with them like cowards in a retreat. She turned to Jed, and for the first time touched his face, not gently, not roughly, just enough to steady him. Her thumb ran across the raw, what the rope had left. You stayed, she whispered. He didn't answer. His breath caught, but not from pain. From something deeper, something unspoken that had taken root ever since the river, since the blue corn, since her silence had become a kind of language between them. They didn't go back to the porch. They sat beside the embers and waited for dawn. In the days that followed, the gossip got quieter. The sheriff didn't visit, but left a note nailed to Jed's gate. Asterisk, keep your head down. Don't give them a reason. Asterisk, Jed burned it without a word. She came often, never stayed overnight, never came empty-handed. Some days she brought herbs for the wound. Other days a carved flute, a strand of river stones, a tin cup filled with strong coffee. He offered her shade, wood to carve, bread when he had it. They built the fence together. Her hands were calloused, her hammering clean. She laughed once, soft and sudden, when a post fell sideways. Jed smiled at the sound. It felt like hearing a stream break ice for the first time after a long winter. Their talks were few, but their silences were long, and that felt truer. He asked once, quiet as a prayer, "Why me?" She paused, setting down a rail. "Because you did not run." They sat under a cottonwood, sweat damp and sunburnt, sharing a waterskin. Her head rested near his shoulder, not touching, just near enough. He let his hand fall, and she didn't move away. By autumn, the land began to change. Grass grew where ash had once settled. The fence stretched wider. Townfolk began passing through, some with nods, some without. No one dared spit again. And yet they remained on the edge of things. Not quite inside the town. Not quite inside the tribe. Just between. Like the river that had almost taken her. Neither land nor sea, but something restless and flowing. One evening, she brought him a name. It wasn't hers. It was his, asterisk, asterisk, given asterisk, asterisk, in the tongue of her people. She said it meant the man who carries silence. He didn't ask for more, just accepted it with a nod and a long, steady look. She placed a feather in his palm, the same kind she'd worn when he'd pulled her from the river. He looked down at it, then up at her. "Does this mean something?" She smiled, just a flicker, the way fire might dance before smoke carries it off. "Yes," she said, "but not yet." The stars came out above them, patient and eternal. And though he still didn't know her name, he knew her spirit, carved not from riverstone, but from wind and fire and something stronger than either. He watched her walk away under moonlight, silver dress moving like water, and felt, for the first time, like he was not waiting to be filled. He already was. And somewhere in the dark, the river whispered its approval.